Hello everyone, I'm Steven and you're watching Steven Loves Science. And in today's video, we're going to discuss the basics of pedigree diagrams.
Science is the best tool ever devised for understanding how the world works.
Science is a very human form of knowledge. We are always at the brink of the known.
Science is a collaborative enterprise spanning the generations. We remember those
diagrams. So pedigree diagrams are really simple, so we can start off with giving them a simple definition. Easily put, pedigree diagrams are simply a visual representation of inheritance across generations in a family. Okay, so the easiest, simplest looking pedigree diagram we could put up is called a trio. So a trio consists of, here we have mom and dad, and they have one offspring, a girl, Susie, little Susie here. Okay, so in case you haven't figured it out yet, the circle symbol represents female, the square symbol represents male, and that holds true for the daughter as well, as also a circle symbol. So this is our first generation, and this is our second generation. So now we've decided that we want to expand our family, okay? So still we have, starting off with two parents, the male and the female here. This is second generation. And since we have multiple children now, we want to be able to easily identify them, so we'll give them numbers, 1, 2, 3. Okay, so now we've extended our family, and now maybe the second generation children want to have children of their own. So here, we're going to have our third son is going to get married or whatever he's going to do, and he's going to have children of his own. Okay. All right, and this is now the fourth generation here. Okay. And maybe these guys don't have any children, they enter the clergy or do something. So this is a pretty basic now. So what we're looking at now is just a basic family structure. So let's actually make something a little more complicated. So what if these siblings here were actually twins? So just to give you some more notation to memorize. So if we wanted to have twins, then we would represent that as a fork, and our twins can either be monozygotic or dizygotic. They can either be identical twins or fraternal twins. So if we want to have fraternal or dizygotic twins, that's simply represented by this fork here. If we want to have identical or monozygotic twins, we're going to add a little bar. So that's pretty basic. And earlier I said, if you recall, that pedigree diagrams are particularly useful for studying the transmission of disease or a specific trait. So let's get that involved in here. Okay. So up on the board here, I've put a pedigree diagram up, and it is showing disease status, affected versus unaffected. And affected individuals are represented by having their box or circle completely colored in, and unaffected do not have their box or circle colored in. So what can this pedigree diagram tell us about how this disease is inherited? Well, it's pretty easy to figure out, but I don't exactly expect you to, be able to get all of them off the top of your head. So here we have dad who's affected. So we have affected dad. And what's interesting to note is that none of dad's sons inherit the disease, but all of his daughters do. So what can that tell us? What are we starting to think? Well, we're starting to think, what's the difference between a boy and a girl? Well, that would have to be their sex chromosomes, an X and a Y for boys, and an X and an X for girls. So we know that our, start thinking about sex chromosomes here. So then what do we notice? We notice that when this affected daughter becomes a mom, she produces an affected son, but not an affected daughter. Okay, so what does that mean? Well, let's think about it. So before we start considering other things, we know that you do not need two of these alleles to be diseased. You only need one of them, because the dad couldn't have had more than two. So that means the daughter got one, and the daughter can only give one, and she gave one to her son, but not to her daughter, right? So that means that this type of pattern of inheritance is called X-linked dominant. It's X-linked because it's transmitted on the X chromosome. So, for those of you that don't know, mom can only give her X chromosome, right? So if you're a boy, you know you got your X chromosome from mom. So if mom is not affected with a disease on the X chromosome, then you're good. But girls have two X chromosomes, one they get from mom and one they get from dad. So that's why dad was able to transmit his diseased X chromosome, one copy of the disease allele, to both his daughters, and then this daughter subsequently transmitted it to her son, because the son is inheriting the X chromosome from the mother. So this is an example of X-linked dominant, okay? And once again, in future videos, I want to go over these in more detail. Of course, there are other patterns of inheritance. I chose a bit of a complicated one, being a sex-linked disorder, but of course there are autosomal dominant and autosomal recessive diseases. But that's all for today, and I want you to just sit and take this in, maybe look it up online a little bit, read more about it. So thanks for watching this episode of Stephen Loves Science. Hope you can join me again next week.